He was simply being who he was, simply the Son of God. Jesus wasn't a sensationalist. And oftentimes sensationalism drives people away from the very nature of God. I can't make an excuse for someone who goes hyper extreme with sensation with something that is simply the compassion of God. You'll never see me do a lot of the things that some people who, and whatever the reasons may be, I'm not here to judge anybody, but Jesus was not a sensationalist. Somebody would say, well, he spit in the dirt and rubbed it in a man's eye. Well, I'm sure there's more to it than that. You know, he walked on water. What's he got to prove? He needed to get to the boat. I mean, I don't know. But Jesus was not a sensationalist. He was not looking for attention. This only pushes people away. In fact, with that leper, or with the leper that he made clean there in Mark chapter 1, if you look at verse 44, he actually told him, don't tell anybody what happened to you. Now think about that. You've got leprosy. You live in a colony of lepers, away from family and friends. You're not allowed to walk through town without yelling, unclean, unclean. And you want me to not tell anybody? I mean, what is it? Is it like reverse marketing here or something? Don't tell anybody because human nature is to tell everybody, right? Well, here was what really happened. If you keep reading, it said, because now they knew he was in town and this man had been healed, he had to go to a secret place and hide, and people came to him there. He knew what that would do and what it would cause in that city, so he was trying to keep it low so he could just be there amongst the people. So Jesus is not a sensationalist. He's not looking to make a name for himself. He's the Son of God. He had nothing to prove. In another place in the Bible, it says he knew where he'd come from and he knew where he was going. Jesus is still moved with compassion today. I gave you this verse earlier. You can write it down now. Hebrews 13, verse 8, it says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and listen, and forever. If he's the very image of the nature of God, and God said, I am the Lord who heals you, then would forever not encompass healing? In all three ways, naturally, medically, and miraculously? The answer is yes. Jesus was, is, and always will be our healer. It is God's nature, and always will be, to heal. Now, I want to run through a bunch of verses real quick. I'm going to give them to you. I didn't give them to them to put up on the screen because the screen would be rolling so fast you wouldn't see anything. But I just want to make these references to you because sometimes people need a few things to help encourage them. So you can write these down. In Matthew 4, verse 23. Matthew 4, verse 23, it says this, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom. Aren't you glad it's good news? And healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 16, it says, when evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him. He drove out the spirits with the word and healed all their sick. And this was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. And here's a reference back to Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and carried our diseases. I like the way the New Living Translation says it. He took our sicknesses and removed our diseases. When did he do that? He did that even before he went to the cross. The Bible literally says it was the wounds that he bore in his body. It was that cat of nine tails filled with shards of glass and metal and the strips of leather that held it all together. When it was thrust into his body and then caught and ripped from his body, the skin and everything that was exposed, all of that was not for your sin and for forgiveness of sin. It was so that you might be healed. All your sin needed was the drop of sinless blood. That beating was to take our sicknesses and remove our diseases. In Luke chapter 4, verse 40, if you're writing these down, Luke chapter 4, verse 40, it says this. When the sun was setting and the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness, and laying his hands on each one, he healed them. In Luke chapter 6, verse 17, it says, he went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by evil spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. Man, isn't that cool? Let me ask you a question today. If Jesus were around today, if you knew we were going to be at the landing tonight at 6 o'clock, who might go just out of curiosity? Half of you. Man, I'd go. I mean, that's what people were doing. And the reason they were doing this is because they were hearing about the nature of God. Who is this one? What is it that we've heard? Listen, we are curious by nature, aren't we? I mean, somebody can yell, fight, and everybody's going to turn to look, aren't they? I mean, go to any school in Jacksonville. If there is even the sound of a fight, there's a crowd. They don't even know why they're cheering. I've been on campus when they've broken out and thought, thank God I'm not a teacher, because to get through that crowd to the fight, you're going to suffer some harm. It's not to deter anybody from sending your kids to public schools. Mine were all public school kids, and they're doing just fine. But, I mean, we're just curious. I mean, yesterday we were driving from South Florida back to Jacksonville, and there was a car accident. One car completely on its side and another one up on the bed. This thing's obviously been over for a while. Everybody's slowing down to do what? To look. We're curious. And it was no different in that day. And here's what was happening when they were getting near Jesus. The very nature and the power of God was impacting every single person in the crowd. Did you notice how often I read all? All were being healed. All. Now, I know our question today and so many of our experiences and maybe some things that are going on in our heads and hearts would cause us. But that was then. Let's just go back to the question. Why is Jesus a healer? Because he's filled with compassion. You don't truly know compassion until you know the compassion of God. And it's something that begins not at something that we would think huge like this, but the day that you ever stepped over that line of faith and said, God, this is my life. All that it is. I don't understand you or everything yet about you. But you kind of make a commitment of your life to God, and it's in faith. And as you begin to walk out that journey, what you begin to experience is compassion unlike anything you've known. You've never seen a telethon. You've never been part of a charity race or a charity drive that even measures up to the kind of compassion that you experience when you get next to the nature of God and the compassion of God. And it is so enormous. It is so powerful that it heals what is broken. It restores what is lost. It redeems what was taken away. Jesus is filled with compassion. Even today. Here's my next question. Is it his will to heal? Is it his will? I sound like I'm from South, don't I? His will. It's being around my daughter who's been going to school in Tennessee too long. That's what it is. Is it his will to heal? Remember what Jesus told that man with leprosy when he said, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Mark chapter 1, verse 40, if you're remembering back. Do you remember what Jesus' reply was in verse 41? Jesus replied, I am willing. The express image and nature of God, the reflection of God, said to the question, are you willing? Notice he did not say, are you able? He said, are you willing?